Hello, everybody. Welcome to our interesting discussion that we're having here today with Craig Williams. Today's going to be something yet again a little bit different than we usually do. I like to keep switching it up and trying new ideas. So today we're going to have Craig sort of take the lead on this stream, and he's going to speak with us for about a half hour or so, give or take, about the Bhagavad Gita. So he's picked a couple of specific verses, I suppose, from it that he would like to discuss with us. So I think it's going to be really fun, and after reading his 3 books, I know he just has a wealth of knowledge, so I wanted to just kind of give him an open floor with this one today to just go crazy with it. So I will go ahead and pull Craig into the chat here now. Hey Craig, how you doing?
Hey, I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man, thanks for coming on again. It's the honor is mine, the pleasure is mine to have you here today. And yeah, I guess if you'd like to, we could go ahead and hop right into it then.
Absolutely. Yeah, I thought it would be nice today to discuss some verses from the Bhagavad Gita, which really bring a lot of these esoteric teachings down to earth. That's one of the challenges, particularly when you're studying any esoteric tradition. It tends to begin really transcendent really quickly. It tends to quickly fall into something which seems fantastical or otherworldly, or that's kind of what people maybe are even looking for.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I love so much about the Bhagavad Gita is it really grounds these important teachings in our everyday life. And so these verses, I think, are a really beautiful way for us to remind ourselves of that. And also, these verses are really amazing in their secret teachings concerning rituals and how we can turn everyday activities into rituals and sacred rituals. And that's something that's very important for me in my writings, but it's also very important for me to talk about, is how every second of our life can become a sacred ritual if we have the right perspective. So that's the background of why I picked these verses. There's so many different verses from the Bhagavad Gita, and also too, there's so many versions of the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
I have a massive collection of so many different types of Bhagavad Gitas, and they're all essentially the same, but there can sometimes be some nuances based on who's translating it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I often get the question about, what's the best translation? And I don't think there really is a best translation. There's just going to be nuanced translation. It's a very important distinction to say. Oftentimes, I do recommend the collection called God Talks with Arjuna, which is Yogananda's 2-volume discussion of the Bhagavad Gita. I do really like that one for many reasons. One, the actual 2-volume set has a very in-depth commentary that is just filled with important teachings on yoga, which would just be wonderful for any seeker. And also, too, you can get a separate version that is just the actual text without the commentary. And I think that's important. I want to make a kind of a small statement about that. Is the Bhagavad Gita is literally a song. It's a sacred song. And so when we read it, we study it, ideally, some of the times when we're reading it, whether we're meditating on it, whether we're using it for mantras, whether we're using it for some type of sacred reading, it's nice to read it through without any commentary. And I always give the example of, it'd be like if you were listening to a song, and after every 10 seconds in the song, we stopped the song and talked about what we just heard, and then restarted the song and then stopped it. So that's interesting to do after you've heard the song 100 times. But if you haven't heard the song ever, that gets really weird, and it just kind of breaks up a continuity. And so that's what I always want people to experience, this kind of continuity that we're getting when we read a poetic work or a melodious work like the Bhagavad Gita. So I usually encourage people to get, one copy that might have a commentary. If they just want to pick one verse, let's say they're doing Lectio Divina one day, and they just pick one verse, and there's a nice commentary they can read and ponder.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. But also have a separate version where it's just the actual text itself.
Yeah.
And then you can just read it through and get kind of a feel for that. And so that's what I like that. And also, too, that it's nice to have the small pocket edition you can bring around and carry with you anywhere you go without having to carry a big commentary or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's something I recommend a lot. So definitely check out the God Talks with Arjuna. It's a 2-volume set, but they also have a small separate, just the actual Bhagavad Gita itself, which is from the translation of Yogananda, which I really like.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, Yogananda's translation left a lot of the Sanskrit words in it, which is really nice because once you learn the Sanskrit words, it really brings out a deeper level of understanding. And the Bhagavad Gita is a very simple text to study and understand. It's not abstruse or hard to penetrate. I always talk about the Bhagavad Gita being something which prepares someone to go deeper into Hindu studies or Vedic studies. After they study the Bhagavad Gita in depth, then when they go to the Upanishads or they go to the Rig Veda, they'll have a different perspective and they have a different vocabulary they can draw. And so it prepares the mind, it prepares the concepts that we might have. And strangely enough, in the Western European yoga world, they've had a real fascination with the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which is an extremely esoteric book that requires a lot of background preparation, which your average person does not have, and they've almost completely ignored the Bhagavad Gita. Mostly because the Bhagavad Gita would fall into religious teachings.
Yeah.
And so the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali can be easily, a verse can be picked and people won't be threatened that they're having to worship something, or they won't be threatened that it's different than their religion. They won't have to change anything. While the Bhagavad Gita is clearly a type of religious book with Krishna speaking to us, teaching us. And so it has a certain bhakti feel to it from that, although it teaches everything. So I think that's one of the reasons why it gets left out a lot. It just makes some people uncomfortable. But let's read through the 3 verses from chapter 15, and then I'll go back verse by verse and discuss some of the important concepts in this. Now, these verses, I could literally teach a weekend workshop on these 3 verses. And I have done that before.
Nice.
But today we're going to kind of keep it a little bit tighter, a little bit concise. And if anyone has any questions and they're here today, then of course they can type them in. We can answer. Perhaps if they watch it on review and have some questions, we can discuss it in a follow-up. That's always easy as well.
Yeah, that sounds great.
But chapter 15, verse 12, it starts out where Krishna is speaking, and he says, "Know that I am the light of the sun, the moon, and fire that illuminates the entire world. By my potency, I enter the earth and maintain all living beings. I nourish all plants by becoming the moon and provide them with the essence of life. I am the fire of digestion that resides in all beings, and I unite with the incoming and outgoing life air to digest all types of food." So those are 3 really interesting verses that we can kind of look at. And the first verse, which is verse 12, "Know that I am the light of the sun, the moon, and fire that illuminates the entire world," is a very important esoteric teaching which ties this book back to the Rig Veda. Mainly the concept that all of these transmissions from this divine realm were coming via light. It was literally coming for some kind of transmission of light. Even if we look at the teachings of Vedic astrology, we call that Jyotish, or the science of light, and how light is literally traveling to the world. And so we have 3 different symbols of light there: the sun, the moon, and fire. And those are three key symbols of many aspects of tantric teachings, many aspects of yogic teachings. Of course, people who studied yoga can clearly see how the sun and the moon are related to the third eye or the Ajna chakra. That's their force, but it's also related to the solar and the lunar currents in the body, the Ida and the Pingala. And then fire is definitely related to the concept of Agni, that each of us within ourselves has a spark of the divinity, a spark, a flame from the great fire, the divinity that resides in all beings, that resides in not only all beings, but all parts of creation. So this really kind of helps us see that these cosmic bodies are also manifestations of Sri Krishna. So every time we look at the sun, every time we look at the moon, and every time we see any example of fire, whether it's a beautiful fire that we're sitting around at night, or it's an Agnihotra Vedic ritual fire where we're pouring ghee over it, or it could be just a simple candle that you have at home on your altar. All those are potent symbols of the presence of Sri Krishna. And that's a very important concept to think. And the concept with the sun is an interesting one to talk about for many reasons, but number one would be the concept of the very important moment at the rising of the sun. And so that's oftentimes in yoga, they'll talk about that as the Brahma Muhurta, the sacred hour, the moments when the sun is rising. And that's a very important time for us to practice mantra, to practice meditation, to do rituals, different types of special blessings come at that time, because when the sun's first rising, and from the Rig Veda, they would call that Usha, or the dawn goddess is rising, and these rays of light are showering over to the earth, we're able to experience a great radiance of prana, cosmic prana, all over us. And some of the most beautiful examples of that is the German film Wings of Desire. Even the Western world has taken these concepts, and I'm not sure if people are familiar with this movie. It was sadly remade into an American version with Nicolas Cage. Not that it was not that it was sad that Nicolas Cage was in it, but he's always entertaining.
Yeah.
But they took a very complex foreign film and made it into a very kind of sappy American film. But they kept this scene, and what the scene they kept was that every morning when the sun was rising, they would pan out, and all the angels, all the guardian angels on earth would stop and gather to watch the rising of the sun. And they would hear the music of the spheres when the sun was rising. And it was a very beautiful moment in the film, just showing that these ancient cultural ideas of the sun rising and that sacred time and honoring that. And most of us can feel that if we are up and we see the sun rising, we can feel the inspiration from that. Of course, it has a poetic meaning too. They'll say, the sun will rise tomorrow. It'll be another day. The sun will always rise. And it brings a sense of hope, a sense of faith, the return of the light. And so, but every time we look at the sun, but particularly at the rising of the sun, can be a very important time to bring in sacred prana into our life or to feed it into our ritual. And for us to always remember that radiance of life is truly light. And we can even break that down to a really fundamental medical concept. And that concept is that on every cell in the body, there's a receptor for vitamin D. So literally every cell in our body will react to the rays of the sun.
Interesting.
And so it's fascinating. And so even on a cellular level, we're connected to the rays of the sun, Savitar. Of course, that's also for people who have deeper studies in Vedic sciences, they're familiar with the Gayatri mantra, which is a very important mantra to the sun, which brings a great sense of protection, healing, and power. This is also a nod to that even Krishna is inside the Gayatri mantra. I discussed the Gayatri mantra a little bit in Tantric Physics So that's there as well. But the concept is that every part of our body is relating to the sun, regulating our mood, our immune system, the health of our gut, systemic inflammation. And this is why when people are exposed to natural light regularly, their circadian rhythms tend to be in a greater balance. This is also why you read these studies, which a lot of them are coming out now, where people who go camping after a couple of days will see their cortisol levels drop.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes because they're starting to expose themselves to natural rhythms of nature, which have to do essentially with the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun. That happens. And so the more they're exposed to that, the more their body starts to find its own natural rhythm. So we can see this connection between the sun. Obviously, it has a beautiful spiritual concept, but it also has a very basic concept of our just physical health and physical vitality. It's also interesting because we tend to think of the sun as something beautiful and something which brings life and causes things to grow. But in Ayurveda and Vedic concepts, and also in biodynamic farming, Rudolf Steiner's teachings, the moon has even more power controlling how things grow on this earth. So this is with this verse where it says, "Know that I am the light of the sun," but he's also saying, "But he's also the light of the moon." And so this is a beautiful concept, even at night. Culturally, we know that humanity feels a mysterious connection to the moon. And there is very mysterious tantric teachings related to the relationship between the sun. And even in Vedic astrology, the concept of the moon is very important because the moon controls our emotional state of mind, how our emotional mindset is. And of course, as we know, the moon waxes and wanes. It changes, constantly changing back and forth, kind of reflecting the constant transient nature of our emotions. One day we're happy, one day we're sad, one day we're angry, one day we feel nothing. That's just normal. That's how emotions move through the body. But the moon also brings great cooling blessings of what we would call cosmic soma. And that's a type of secretion within the body, which helps our body to rejuvenate. That's kind of what we're talking about when we mention the body getting back into a balance of circadian rhythm. That means exposure to the sun, rising when the sun's setting, going to sleep early at night, letting that, and also even being aware of the cycles of the moon. That's an important concept, and it has a lot to do with natural secretion of melatonin at night so that people sleep deeper, and then balance spiking of cortisol in the morning where we just naturally wake up without having to have an alarm clock. So we sleep deeper and rejuvenate overnight, wake up refreshed. So that's a basic concept. But the moon, we know, also has a very mysterious factor to it. And so the moon has a lot to do with more esoteric teachings, transformation, tantric ideas, and also a lot to do with Ayurvedic alchemy ideas. But even that, so when we look at the moon at night, we even know that Krishna is even radiating through that. And an important concept to keep in mind with this is that the light of the moon, the radiance of the moon, is caused by the sun.
Yeah.
So the sun's rays are hitting the moon, and all the light we're seeing from the moon is a reflection from the sun. So it's a very important symbolic idea that the light of the moon is still just a reflection of this more powerful cosmic body of the sun. And of course, that has very esoteric teaching in Tantra and alchemy. But it also can show us that even every aspect of our human emotions it can be a potential reflection of the divine light within it and has something to teach us. And so we don't want, for example, that's one of the things where people will notice when they're on antidepressants, prescription antidepressants, is they'll often say something like, well, I guess I'm not sad anymore, but I'm not anything anymore. I just don't feel anything. I'm not happy. I'm not sad. It's just kind of blah.
Yeah.
And that's a troubling sign. Now, of course, no one's giving people recommendations to stop taking their medication. People need to listen to this with the right understanding. What we're saying is that's a sign that something is out of balance in the body, because as human creatures, we should feel emotions.
Yeah.
We should feel happiness. We should feel sadness. We should feel grief. We should feel joy. And these things come and go. And so when that's turned off, oftentimes things go very flat. And so that can even be a sign that these kind of balanced parts of the body we're not processing these cosmic energies. And so understanding that, it has a lot of tantric implications in how tantra can help heal people and reconnecting with their emotions. So the sun and the moon, very fascinating, but they're also just right there. I mean, we can see them. Every night we can look at the moon and feel the presence of Krishna. Every morning when the sun rises, we can imagine the presence of Krishna and the goddess that goes along with him. Well, too. And remember, there's always a goddess. It's always Krishna and Sri Radha, because Krishna is the sun, but then we have the rising of the dawn is the goddess Usha. And then with the moon, of course, we have Krishna, but there's also the moon is the ultimate symbol of the goddess Shakti, this cosmic cooling Shakti which relaxes. So that's something to always keep in mind as well. And then fire. From that verse ends with fire. And fire means any type of fire. Any type of fire that exists, whether it's a forest fire, whether it's a fire that we have at home, but also the fire that we see in nature, something as simple as the leaves changing color in the fall. When the leaves turn from green to red to orange, that's an expression of Agni, or fire, in nature. And that's also an expression of Krishna's potency working directly through nature. And also too, there was always a goddess factor to that. Anytime there was an offering to flame or an offering to fire, we would say the Sanskrit word swaha. Swaha, and something was sown. And that is the feminine goddess of related to both Sri Radha and the goddess of fire, all the goddesses. That's a very important teaching in the Gopishwara ideas. So that's something that people should always remember. Every one of these things has a god and a goddess, Shiva and Shakti, Krishna and Radha, Agni and Soma. They're all kind of focusing within that. But I think it's important for people they can look at the sun, they can remember this verse, then they can look at the moon and realize it too is a reflection of this light. And then it brings it even more down to earth. And they can have a flame at home or a fire at home and realize this too is an expression of this cosmic light that's radiating through not only my body, but also nature. And I can offer my intentions to it, and it can bring healing force. We go into the next verse, and it says, by my potency, I enter the earth and maintain all living beings. I nourish all plants by becoming the moon and provide them with the essence of life. So this is also interesting too. It's like first we're talking about cosmic symbols, but then now Krishna is saying, yes, I'm the sun, I'm the moon, I'm all flames and fires, but I also literally enter the earth. So I'm out there, but I'm also in here. And it enters the earth through via Prakriti, which is the goddess of creation. And so every aspect of our terrestrial world is the flesh of the divine. So this has, of course, radical implications for how we treat the earth, how we respect the earth, how we treat natural resources. This is like the ultimate original environmentalism, right? That everything that's going on the earth is the sacred body of Krishna and Radha, and it should be treated as such. And then also, since it's in the earth, it's also going into the plants. And that's where you see a little nod here to Ayurveda. And they say, I nourish all the plants by becoming the moon. Mm-hmm. And that's a big concept in Ayurveda. The moon was controlling the growth of plants. And like I mentioned earlier, Rudolf Steiner would clearly discuss this in his concept of biodynamic farming. And that was the idea of different things harvested on cycles of the moon, and that the plants actually were extracting some kind of nourishment from the unique light of the moon. And
Oh,
that's the next verse, that where it says, and provide them with the essence of life. That the translation is the correct Sanskrit translation would be like Soma Bhutva Rajatmaka, which means the Soma from the moon is infusing a rasa, or sap, of life into these substances. And so I talk about the rasa a lot. Rasa is this taste, this juice, this essence, so that we extract from life. Every life experience we have, life experience we have, has an essence. It has a taste. Some are pleasant, sweet. Some are bitter, harder to digest. But we still want to learn how to extract that. And so this comes from the moon. They're saying the moon is kind of infusing all plants with a substance we can extract. And so this is very interesting. This obviously means that we can make alchemical spagyric tinctures, of course, for tantric work, yogic work, Western alchemical work. That's one, of course, very interesting, more mysterious facet of it. The other part is that we can respect and kind of form a relationship to plants and see how they can heal us. That's also kind of connection to just straight Ayurvedic medicine. But it's also too that we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but it's kind of showing that the plants are related to us. Everything we grow, we can form a connection with, whether that's through elemental spirits or whether that's just through a reverence to the earth, reverence to the harmony of the season, and what we can do with that. Of course, people who are into wine and biodynamic farming and biodynamic wines, this makes a lot of sense because it's how the grapes are grown, how the grapes are extracted, how the unique specific wines are made based on cycles of the moon. It's its own type of alchemy, and one of the reasons why I love wine so much. So that's even kind of intimated in this. And so we can form unique connections with that. So it's important to remember that the sun is sacred, the moon is sacred, all fire is sacred, but every facet of the earth is sacred. Everything that grows on the earth is sacred and has some kind of function, which is very interesting. And like I said, it's a very important concept for us to think about today in our sadly unique situation where environmentalism is kind of turning into fear porn or doom porn,
yeah.
where every which is kind of sad. But this brings a little bit more of a joy and a reverence back, turning things into sacred things. This is also these verses. I picked these verses specifically because these verses were a big inspiration behind my concept in entering the desert of the concept of the sacramental vision. Because if we look at the world with sacramental vision, with a vision that sees the divine in everything and everyone, then the sun, the moon, the fire becomes alive. The earth becomes alive. The plants become redolent and radiant with a juice, which is a type of amrit or sap of immortality to us. And we can learn to extract that, all depending on our specific way we view the world. And so, how can we do that? Well, that's a complex question, but one of the ways we can start is by seeing things in a ritualistic fashion. We could rise at the setting sun, do our prayers, and watch the cycles of the moon, be aware of that, have gardens, take care of the earth, spend time in nature, spend time communicating with plants and understanding plant medicine and how that affects us. And also, too, plants clean our environment. They clean the air. They provide oxygen for us. So we have a connection with that. Just like chlorophyll has a very close structure to human blood. It is the plant blood, essentially. It's a sap. So that's a rasa, too. So it's very mystical and very beautiful, very down to earth, but very multi-layered. And then this next verse is truly important for us to bring in our everyday lives. And this verse is verse 14, which says, I am the fire of digestion that resides in all beings, and I unite with the incoming and outgoing life airs to digest all types of food. If I read that more from Sanskrit, it would be more something like, I am the fire, I am the Jathat Agni, the fire of digestion that resides in all beings. I unite with the prana and the apana movement. And so there he's talking about the movement of prana in the body and out the body, which is a very important concept with digestion. But this is basically saying that every time we eat, it can be a sacred ritual. That every time we sit down to eat, every time we put something in our mouth, the fire of digestion, which literally starts in our saliva, that with the amylase enzyme in our mouth, and then goes to the stomach, where with the parietal cells of our stomach, they start to secrete pepsin, which transforms hydrochloric acid. That starts to digest. And then once that's finished, it leaves and goes into the small intestine, where the pancreatic enzymes start to finish digesting things. And then once that's finished, it goes to the large intestine. And then we have our whole microbiome of bacteria, which transforms things. So Krishna is saying that every aspect of this digestion is Krishna. It's sacred. It's the divine. And this is where digestion of food is a type of alchemy. This is why healthy digestion was so important in Ayurveda, of course, in Chinese medicine and every type of medicine. But there's a fire in our mouth, there's a fire in our stomach, there's a fire in the intestines, and all of that is transforming food so that it becomes us. We're taking a base substance and we're transforming into life. So what we should do, what does that mean? That means that each time we eat, we should eat with a sense of reverence, calmness, gratitude, and a sense of joy that we have a human body that can still be here in this earth and can eat food and it can digest us. We know this, that if we sit and commune with people that we care about over a meal, it feels good. That was, growing up in the South, the dinner time was very sacred. You could do anything you want, but you were supposed to be home for dinner. And after that, you could go do it. So that was something which was always around. And that's something that we've lost a lot now. But that's a fundamental concept within Ayurveda is for healthy digestion, we have to stop what we're doing. We have to sit down, turn off the external stimuli, say a prayer of gratitude for what we have, and then slowly consume our food in a sense or with an attitude of gratitude. And that helps improve digestion. So that what that means is like, don't eat while you're driving, right? Don't eat while you're watching TV. Don't eat while you're watching the news. That would be a big one. Don't eat while you're don't eat while you're opening your bills. And like I always used to tell people, never talk about your student loans over dinner. That's not something we would want to do. And then also, too, this is even the concept of we would see if not eating with someone that you didn't trust or you had bad prana with. This is also why many Brahmin priests would have their own chefs or own cooks that would travel with them, so they knew who prepared the food, and they would only eat food if they knew who prepared it. So that because they knew that the process of cooking, the process of digestion, very mysterious, sacred things were happening. In many ways, our body's opening up to take something in. And that could be good or bad. So that's even a traditional concept of that is coming from these ideas. But you could even take a real concept. You don't have to go into some huge concept of what the Brahmin priest ate. This could be something as basic as that when you're at home making food for yourself, see your kitchen as a sacred space, a place where you can create nourishing meals to heal ourselves and to kind of unite, whether it's family or friends, in a sense of joy. But it can also mean, even if you're not cooking at home, let's say you're eating out somewhere, That means that the people that are serving you food should be treated with the utmost respect. That you should treat the person who's serving your food with respect. You should treat the person who's cooking your food with respect. And you should, for example, very practically, you should treat the person who's taking your order with very deep respect, because that whole environment of eating is basically a type of prayer honoring Krishna and Radha according to this verse. And that's also this concept of Agni that we have. There's an Agni in the plants, there's an Agni in our stomach, and we can extract this, and it can be good or bad. But that verse to me is very important because obviously with a medical practice, I see a ton of people who have poor digestion, and a ton of people have digestion problems, and a lot of that isn't because they're not taking the perfect digestive enzyme or they're not taking special formula. It's just they're eating too fast, they're not eating with attention, or they're eating while they're stressed out. That's a big problem. So even from that concept, this verse, I have a lot of people just write this verse out and just put it in the kitchen. And it's almost like a prayer that you can have in the kitchen to even say this before you eat. And it also, too, this is when they say the incoming and outgoing life airs, that's prana. So it was very common for people to say a type of prayer or a mantra to the types of 5 prana before meals, or to honor prana before meals, because it was prana was coming in with the food, but our body also has a certain type of prana which moves our digestion, which gives things moving, keeps the whole process going, and takes things in, but it also gets things out. And so that's what they're talking about, the incoming and outgoing prana. They're saying there's some kind of prana that we take something in, we swallow it down, goes to our stomach, it has to move around, and then it has to leave. And if any one of those parts aren't functioning well, then we would either have heartburn at the top, nausea, stomach ache, or constipation or diarrhea on the bottom. And so that's all those pranas have to be working in harmony, so they would kind of respect that. And Ayurveda, that's a very detailed concept in Ayurvedic medicine, which Ayurvedic practitioners try to teach their clients or their students with that. But I think that's a beautiful verse. And these 3 verses kind of show that although these lofty concepts that are being taught in the Bhagavad Gita can be very mysterious, they're also directly related to cosmic phenomena, terrestrial phenomena, and then everyday phenomena. And we can always have these resonances. I call them resonances. There's a cosmic resonance of the cosmic bodies. There's a terrestrial resonance of the sacred goddess Bhudevi, the earth. And then there's a resonance of the power of our digestion. And it also hints at the concept of that we digest things physically, but we also digest things psychologically and emotionally.
Yeah.
And so that's a big concept of saying that, if we're not feeling well psychologically, emotionally, it might mean that there's a digestive capacity that is off. And this is why in a lot of schools of thought, a lot of tantric tradition, whether we refer to it as a type of yoga psychology, or whether we're calling it Ayurvedic medicine, or whether many traditions just call it tantric medicine, many of the things that are, quote, prescribed for emotional disturbances is bhakti or ritual. They want people to pray more, to do sacred rituals, and they believe that has a healing power in the body. So when people spend more time around sacred rituals, doing sacred rituals, it has a healing effect on the mind. It has a healing effect, it balances emotions, just like mantras can do that, but also sacred rituals. So that verse is packed. I always say this verse is very pregnant. You could just kind of unwrap this as it goes on and on. And it just shows that the fire of Krishna exists in everyone. Everyone who exists on the earth, everything that exists on the earth, every plant, every piece of soil, every stone, every star, everything that emits light, all of these is a radiance of Krishna. So it's not some type of cosmic intelligence which is abandoned us and exists in some far off realm. No, it's here all the time, every day, if we just have the eyes to see it. That's, I thought people would appreciate that, and I wanted people could see how that what ties in with the concept of the sacramental vision. Even if they're not a Hindu, they can start to see everything with a little bit more reverence, a little bit more sacred, and turning things into a sacrament. And there you go.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. That was a really, really interesting dialogue that you just gave us there. Yeah, and that's, as I was saying, that's the thing that resonates for me in relation to Hinduism more so than a lot of, it's just sort of strikes me that so much of it is universal. Like, yoga
Yes.
isn't just for a Hindu, yoga is for everybody. Ayurveda isn't
Yes.
just for a Hindu, Ayurveda is for everybody. Meditation isn't just for a Hindu, meditation is for everybody. And then even when you get to their gods, Brahman isn't just for a Hindu, Brahman is for everybody. And and you can start to like put the timelines of history together and almost say, maybe it really is all that, You don't have to do that, but if you wanted to play that game, you could take it pretty far. I mean, that's sort of that's where my head's been at the last couple of months, thinking like, how much of what I've thought of before all stems back to this thing. Because I've had, just different esoteric questions in my mind since I was 12, 13 years old, and so many of them get answered through these sorts of things that you're talking about. And not, just out of the blue, like one thing every year or two, it always just keeps popping back into my head again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And these are important concepts for us to think that, like you said, these teachings are for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
They exist on a primordial level so that everyone has access to these teachings. And it's the ultimate radical egalitarianism in the sense that everyone can digest this, everyone can understand this. Obviously, it's so deeply layered that everyone coming to these verses will bring their own unique perspective, but it could also transform their own perspective. Because when we're reading these verses, we're consuming them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like what we're reading, we're consuming them with our indriyas, and when we're talking about them, we're chewing it. And then when we contemplate it, we kind of swallow it and it digests. And we hope that when we leave this discussion, or where people leave this discussion, or people in the future hear this discussion, that in some ways they're consuming it and then they digest it. It has hopefully a pleasant flavor, pleasant rasa for them. And then it can go into their body and their mind and inspire them.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as a reminder, anybody that wants to throw any questions into chat, go ahead. We already have some in here that I will definitely be getting to. And anybody else that has any other questions, just go ahead and put them into chat. And if I don't get to it immediately, I will at some point here. So let's see. Earlier on, your flame said, I remember hearing at some point that Kali is related to the dark side of the moon, but this could be completely wrong or nothing. And then later on, they laughed and said, then Craig himself was the reference that I could not seem to remember. Thanks for that. So what would you have anything to add to that?
No, that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, you could, of course, the the concept, the moon is extremely mysterious intelligence. It's extremely, I tend to refer to the planets in their Sanskrit terms, called graha, those intelligence which grabs us or which seizes us. And that's where we often talk about in different systems I mentioned it in the Cultic Golgotha that, people's consciousness is food for the moon. The moon kind of eats people. And that's the concept of how if our emotions are not in control, or if we are not in control of our minds, then we're not in control of our lives. And there's a very important connection to that with when Krishna says, the thought that you have at the moment of death determines the next step in your consciousness. And so that's a lot related to the moon. The concept is that once we pass out of this incarnation, the state of our mind is incredibly important to what happens. So all of our life, we should be learning to understand our mind and kind of creating a harmonious or balanced mental atmosphere, and understanding our emotions, and understanding how we can extract something from our emotions, but we don't have to be slaves to our emotions or controlled by our emotions. We can take them in, we can experience them, but then we let them go. That's the problem that most people have with their mood or their mindset, is that they can't let an emotion go.
Mm-hmm.
They ruminate on it, which has, of course, has a lot to do with compassion and forgiveness. We just have to let things go.
Yeah, I've learned this concept a while back through something probably related to Buddhism. But basically the idea was that you get a bad idea in your head, and it's like a song that's skipping on a record, and like
Yeah, yeah,
you get this horrible moment of your life, and it just keeps playing, it just keeps skipping back to it, and it's like, if you just change your thought, you can move on and have a good day. But everybody just wants
yeah,
to hit that repeat button and just replay
yes,
the worst moment of their life like 5,000 times every single day, like literally. And
yes,
just to
yeah.
constantly remind yourself, I am playing this bad moment on repeat. I need to stop doing that.
That's a very beautiful way to express it, and it just sums it up entirely. It's
Yeah,
like that's the
it's
whole
not my
thing,
own
because
idea. I wish I knew where I got it from.
yeah. Well, it really speaks to this idea of like that we have a certain resonance of our consciousness. Our mind has like a background noise,
Hmm.
and that background noise can be either harmonious or it can be caustic, or it can cause problems. And so that's one of the things that even Krishna was saying in that other verse, which we can maybe talk about in the future, is that we always have to work on our consciousness so that we remember the correct thing when we're passing away. We always have something on our mind that's important. And that's one of the reasons why they wanted people to study these teachings and to hear commentary from sages, because they wanted people to fill their minds with sacred ideas rather than filling their minds with trivial details
Yeah.
or worries or fear. And that's something which I talk about a lot, is that, you know, the our modern, obviously the modern media is just filled with kind of poisonous things to put people in a constant state of fear, and nothing to inspire them and nothing to bring faith, hope, love. And so that's kind of on ourselves, right? We can't expect someone else to do that. But that's one of the benefits of these traditional teachings, is that becomes our food, that becomes what we're feeding our senses. And that's an important concept. But the dark side of the moon could easily be connected to Kali, any kind of sense of darkness, but in many ways, the entire body of space is Kali.
Mm.
So any type of that vast blackness of space is Kali. And then, of course, we have to remember that there are very fascinating and mysterious connections between Sri Krishna and Kali, and how they morph back and forth, and what their connections are. So we could just as easily say the dark side of the moon is a mischievous aspect of Krishna.
Yeah, that's what I
If we
was gonna
want to.
ask, because I had that thought when I was reading it before we started, was that, in one sense, uh, it's sort of a lot of questions in one. I don't even know how to put it, but it's like Krishna seems like in this verse that he's saying he is, that is, the moon, but also, like you were saying, there's a feminine reflection of every masculine
Yes.
deity. So is Krishna saying I am the masculine and the feminine, or is he saying there is the other one that is, you know what I mean? Is he like,
Oh yeah.
is he
Yeah.
reminding you, I am not only me, I am also my feminine, you know not himself, but literally the other deity that is the feminine side, like I am all of these deities, or you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. 100%. That's a very important concept. It's I always say it's hidden in plain sight in these verses.
Yeah,
And I will say this, we talk about these concepts, and it can be very easy for people to think that we're saying everything's the same. It's all just one big, but that's not what this is saying. This is saying like everything is the same, but it has its own unique expression.
Yeah, there's aspects of.
It's a very nuanced discussion. It's almost like saying everything is quantum physics. Well, yeah, sure, but we also know that Newtonian physics works pretty well. If I punch a wall, it hurts.
Yeah.
It hurt my hand.
Yeah.
I can't just say my hand is a facet of light, and it's but no, I'll be like, no, it really, I have to. That's why in Kung Fu we do iron palm training. We hit stones, and we hit the same. We spend months trying to make our hands where it doesn't hurt, but we have to do all this stuff to get there. So we know that there's different factions of reality. We don't just kind of blindly, with some kind of like neo-Vedanta 1980s New Age, say, oh, everything's the same, every god's the same, everything, because that's not what we're saying.
Mm-hmm. And I was confused by that a little bit when I was first starting to look into these things before I was even reading any of your books. Just on my own random time, that was sort of what I was getting from it in a way. And then, the deeper you go, the more you realize that there's a lot more nuance to it than that. It still sort of is that, but it's not. And yeah, we could go probably for hours just on the nuances of that little idea or big idea.
that is a good point. I mean, that could be an entire essay. It could be a lecture too. But I always like to kind of bring up that point, is that while we're talking about that, we're not saying, oh, it's just all the same. But it's more in the sense of saying, oh my gosh, this is so mysterious. Is it a particle or is it a wave? Wait, it's both. How can that happen? Well, we don't know.
And yet it does.
But yet it does. Exactly. And so that's what a lot of these traditions are saying. It's kind of like saying that, the sun, the moon, and fire, well, they're all light, so they're just all the same.
Yeah.
Well, no. Yes, they are all light, but we can see they're different. They have their own unique facets, and or we could say their unique rasa, their unique essence, their unique taste.
Yeah. And so another question from chat, Vulpes says, I suffered from repetitive thoughts a lot in the past, depression and suicidal ideation. We do need to let go. I began to heal when I started letting things go. So it was not really a question, but just something he was adding to the...
I'm glad that person shared that. And that is a big, huge thing that I talk about a lot. And it has a lot to do with that verse 14 about when Krishna says, I'm the incoming prana, but I'm the outgoing prana. In a sense, it's like we have to let things go. If we don't let things go, it's like, I can think of no better example than if we think about digestion, and when it reaches all the way down to the large intestine and we don't let it go, then we have impacted feces, which stays there, and then for example, estrogen's not secreted, it recirculates and causes cancer. Plastics aren't excreted, it recirculates and causes toxins. It's like such a base example, but that's what we're talking about, is we have to let things go. And once again, we're not just saying some kind of simple thing like let things go, manifest your own reality. It's not that easy. So that's why we have counselors and therapists and cognitive therapy and spiritual pursuits. Like everyone has to have their own unique plan on how they can acquire that, how they can do that. You don't just tell someone let it go, because we all know that, right?
Yeah.
We've all had an experience where maybe someone told us let it go, and you're like, I can't let that go.
And I would like to add in the flip side of this, on the positive end of it too. When I was in Rome back in 2011, there were a bunch of monks that were working on a mandala, And
Oh,
every day I walked by, I'd see the progress that they were making, and then one day they were gone and the mandala was gone. And so even
yeah.
beautiful things, you have to learn to let go of the negative, but even you also learning to let go of the positive is can be equally important, I think.
That's incredibly important, and that is significantly related to the verse about the what you think at the moment of your death determines your next reality. Because we oftentimes in life we not only, like you said, are we not letting things go, but we're constantly grasping.
Hmm.
We want more. We don't want something to end. You know, and that could be something as simple as a beautiful night that you don't want to end. It's a special night. There's a celebration. You're with friends and family, and then you just know the beauty of it. And you're like, oh, I wish this night would never end.
Yeah.
That's the or at the moment of our death, we're like, oh, this life has been great, or this life has been unique, or whatever. I don't want to let it go.
Hmm.
It's just I'm glad you brought that up. It's about that's a big symbol of the phases of the moon. The moon is constantly changing. It's waxing and it's waning, and so that's kind of like how things they come, they go, they come, they go, and that's why we have to cherish each moment. It's like the Japanese tea ceremony. Even if you do the exact same thing every time, it's not the same. It's still different.
Yeah.
So we just have to cherish, no matter how much you want to treasure. And that we can see that's where we get this concept of nostalgia, right? We have these concepts that, like, I even had a moment this morning. I had the wonderful pleasure of and I'm being facetious. The wonderful pleasure of having to go to an Apple store to deal with my iPhone. It's just it's always a joy. But actually, they were wonderful today. But I hadn't been to the mall in like a year,
Yeah.
and then I went to the mall and I was like, oh my god, this is like wild flashback to as my youth.
Hmm.
Then I just started thinking, oh, those things are just gone. They just come and go. These memories, and so you have a nostalgia for that, but you just it's just how time it just moves on. Before you know it, just things are passing, things are going, and that's how life is. And that can be very beautiful. It doesn't have to be bad. So I'm so happy you brought that up. That's true. We have to let things go. We also have to understand that means everything. That means even the good things.
Yeah. And then another just sort of comment here that somebody left, the Scrage said, oh, this is when you were talking about the food. Oh, this is such a nice idea of having meals. I always try to make my friends put their phones away while we're eating together.
Oh yes, 100%. Yeah, I think that's very important. If people can do that, they should do that um, during their mealtime. That's really really important. What a wonderful comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a great way of saying that for sure.
And I had a question on that I think you sort of already answered. I was gonna say, when you're alone, it's one thing, but when you're with your family, like, should you be focused on the consumption of the food, or is just being together as a family unit, like, is that the thing? You know?
That's a really really wonderful question. And because that's a very smart question. It's very nuanced because someone could say, okay, Craig, you said don't eat and watch TV, don't eat and drive. But if I'm eating when I'm with my family and I'm so excited with my family, I'm just going to be eating while I'm talking with my family and not paying attention to the food. So, of course, so yeah, ideally, we want to, number one, the most important thing would just be to eat slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't stuff. So, if someone is eating slowly, they're de facto going to pay more attention to their food and just in general. But you bring up a very good point. The atmosphere in which someone eats is incredibly potent for its influence on our digestion.
Yeah.
So we have a physical atmosphere, of course, but there's an aesthetic atmosphere, right? People present food in a certain way. smell it, we look at it. It's beautiful. It smells good. But also, there's an emotional atmosphere that brings in the concept of the moon. So if we're with people that we love, if we're with people that we care about, if we're with people that make us happy, just that alone will make our bodies digest food better. Which that brings us into the whole French paradox of eating, right? That's the whole European thing. Like we've seen that over the time. They'll talk about, oh, European or French people, they eat more fat, they drink more alcohol, they eat more rich foods, but they don't have the same problem that the other cultures seem to have. And that's typically because obviously they tend to eat fresher foods, but they also eat in a very joyous atmosphere. They have more larger communal dinners. They make a more important time for the meals. They're not rushed. That's a big important thing. I have noticed that cultures that pride the importance of dinner time, there's just already an inherent respect for the sacred nature of what is going on during the meal time. So that's a good question. So mainly I would just say eat slow, but then enjoy the time. You don't have to sit there and be like, oh, don't talk to me, don't say anything to me. It doesn't have to go that far, but you could just say, well, eat slow and then just have a blast, enjoy your time with your family, because we never know if we're going to get another meal with them, right?
Yeah,
We
exactly.
never know. We never know when our next meal with this person is going to be. So every moment, it could be such a potent ritual if we do that.
Yeah. So Jungle Jake, he left a lot of comments here, and then I think he left. So if he is still here, or just to everybody else, I am getting to comments. But if you leave like 15 of them in a row, it's hard for me to get to that one first. And also, just if he is listening, or for other people that might agree with him, I've been atheist for more than half of my life. And these ideas that we're talking about resonate with me on a philosophical level just as much as a level related to Hinduism. So, more or less what he was getting at is just like, can you let go of letting go? No, you can't. Basically, he's saying that we're talking in circles. Like, if you have a bad thing, you should let go of the bad thing. But if you have a good thing, you shouldn't let go of that. What are you, crazy? And it's like, sort of no. Like, I've really thought about this
Yeah.
concept, and I really do think that it makes sense that if you try to hold, I've seen people do it where you think like this is a good moment, this is the moment that I need to keep, and the harder
Yeah.
you try to hold on to that good moment, the worse your next day becomes. You have to know
Yeah.
that even the good moments pass.
Yeah. It's just a fact. It's just a function of life. I mean, it's this. That's why I always go back to the metaphor of digestion. It's like eating a meal that you love, and then telling your body, "Don't let that meal go."
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
we have to let the meal go. It's just a natural process. It's like, and what does that meal turn into? That meal turns into shit.
Yeah.
It turns into shit. It turns into shit, and it turns into piss.
Mm-hmm.
So the most beautiful meal in the world turns into shit and piss.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, that's the reality of the world.
that's how life functions in this realm. And as an agoric perspective, since we want to talk frankly,
Mm-hmm.
that the shit and the piss is the divine.
Yeah.
All of it is sacred. All of it's beautiful. All of it has some factor in that to it. So that's just how it is. And of course, we can have these types of, astral hells, or kind of like astral heavens. I mean, even the Vedas say that even the gods have to come back down after a certain amount of time because they haven't reached a certain level. So even that is, even though their life, they might seem eternal to us, but eventually their time comes out again. So these just factors, these are just kind of like physics
Yeah.
of how this works. But I appreciate his comments, even if they might be negative.
Yeah, me too. That's why I wanted to go ahead and, even though he was kind of
Yeah.
like, it was sort of an attack, I still want to go ahead and answer him because I have thought that through.
Yeah, totally. That's just how these things work. And so that's why I always use digestion as a case. It's like, The beautiful moment, everything comes and goes. That's how it is.
Yeah. So then the Scrage had said a few things here. I think there are different levels to that, just as to everything that has to do with development. One cannot necessarily know on what level one is at when engaging with or are already involved with the process. I was just thinking your point through before answering it. I hope you're still here. I guess he's talking to the other guy. And then he said,
okay.
what I'm trying to say is that you might understand that you're heading towards some point, but you might not be aware of what are your milestones during the voyage.
Right.
And then Lucid Dreams said, excellent sermon. Reception of the various light forms from the sun, moon, and fire igniting the body electric in human beings and other life forms. Digestion is inevitably affected by the reception and permeation of light from these sources, as well as the prana from others involved in the act of consuming. Every act of digestion must be revered to retain a universal homeostasis. Hopefully this has touched people into the importance of meal reverence. Thank you.
What a beautiful comment.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yeah, that's I thank that person for leaving such an eloquent comment. I love that.
Yeah, so let's see. So we're caught up on the comments and chat at the moment. What else did I have here that I wanted to ask you about? I really liked the way that you were talking about just how it could even come down to a candle when you're talking about the different forms of light, because that's something that for me, like, before I get too deep into anything else, like, I've just had that idea of keeping a candle burning as I've been doing things, because as I had mentioned when we talked previously, I was working with Quaria for a couple of years, and it just really isn't, it's not resonating with me, just because the whole concept, I think, of high magic just isn't, it's not that I'm cool with everything happening there, but I just like the sort of concept of bhakti more than high magic, if that makes sense, from what I think I'm making sense. But so, the idea just really transferred well of, like, you always need to have that candle burning, and there's that external candle, and you have your internal candle that's always burning, and it's like you're just making connections on all levels when you light fire.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that the lighting of the fire and the metaphor of the fire and the reality of the fire is such a potent reminder of Agni, how we have the flame inside of us on all levels, from the digestive system to the cellular level to a level of consciousness. And that's just like as above, so below. It's just resonating with something which is happening on a cosmic level, even down to a mundane level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like a fire. And that's, quickly, I mean, that's just the same thing based on that comment. It's like we can create a beautiful fire, right? That's actually a really good thing to touch upon too, is like digestion. It's like there's many times I've been around a fire while camping, and then the fire, you don't want the fire to go out. You're always putting things on the fire, but eventually that beautiful fire, it goes out. It turns into ash, and then that turns into dust. And that's how it goes. It's a symbol for that. There's a combustion, there's a beauty, but then it's ash, and then it's transmuted into that, just like our bodies will be.
Yeah, and thinking about that, it's it really shows how even when people aren't looking to use it for a reason, we still are pulled toward it. I'm thinking back to when I was a teenager hanging out with all of my friends, and nobody had a religious thought in their mind. We were just there to, drink beers and party. But even in the middle of the summer, when it was 90 degrees outside, we were doing it around a fire. We always wanted to have a fire in the center of our group. And, why? Why do you need a fire there? It's not like we were roasting marshmallows on it. It's not like we needed the light or the heat. We just wanted a fire. And, humans are just pulled toward that unity around a flame.
There's something, we sense that primordial sacredness of the fire and everything that it symbols, everything that it symbolizes. So that's so very true.
Yeah, and then another random comment that I wrote down when you were talking about feeling the food move through you. If you ever get really hungry, like if you're fasting or if you just haven't eaten for a long time, you really can tell when you take that first sip of water or eat that first bite of food, like you get the idea of the food really moving through you in a way that when people just kind of stay full all the time, they don't really notice that.
Yeah.
Like you really need that's I think a good reason to fast is to just let your brain remember what it feels like for food to move through your body.
No, that's a very important concept. That's why one of the most important aspects of Ayurveda is not to eat until the previous meal has been completely digested.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a challenge for a lot of people for many reasons, because a lot of times our modern culture says, like, eat every 2 hours, eat every this,
Yeah.
eat when you're not, So a lot of Ayurveda is learning satiety cues, is learning, like, when are you really hungry and when are you really full?
Mm-hmm.
And then learning that, sometimes that can take, it's a process of learning for people, but that's a big, important concept. And that's what that nails. It's like, if you're just constantly eating, you never experience the whole complete process of digestion. When you do, after a while, and that takes some time, you start to get more in tune with your body and sense it, feel it. So that's a very important concept.
Yeah, and then again, if anybody wants to leave any other comments, one another thing I'm getting close. Well, I've got two more interesting things here that I want to ask you at the moment. One is
Wonderful.
if you mentioned the music of the spheres. I'm not sure if I had asked you about that in our previous interview. I don't think I did, but could you just speak a little bit on what that means to you or in general?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that it's all ties back to the concept of the vibration of creation emerging out of some type of cosmic sonic vibration. So essentially, we could look at all of creation, all of life as a type of sonic theology.
Yeah.
It's about our kind of relationship to vibration. Of course, that's where we get the concept of mantra, the concept of sacred languages like Hebrew, Sanskrit, even the concept of the sacrality of the Latin Mass. All of these things, that there's a certain vibration and sound that comes from that, and everything kind of radiates a certain sound or a certain frequency. So, for example, each of the planets is radiating a sound. And so that's the music of the spheres, is all the planet, all the vibrations of the planets kind of radiating together. And even from the concept of the Vedas, is they would say that the rishi, who were seers, the, the rishi kavis, the poet seers, they heard the Rig Veda on the rays of light, the rays of the sun. They literally heard it and then wrote it.
Yeah. I think that concept is so interesting. I think it would be a very interesting concept to viewers of this channel, because dark ambient and this idea of music of the spheres just seems like so in tune with each other. When you're talking about, some albums are made with field recordings of space sounds. Like literally, like sounds recorded like from NASA that people have taken and built into like drone ambient, and it's like it seems like there's just so much there for people that I think that's a potential area of dark ambient that hasn't been fully experimented with yet. People do the space ambient thing, but to really bring in that concept of the music of the spheres, I think I read about it a little bit through Quaria, through Josephine McCarthy, and then I heard Nicholas Schreck talking about it in one of his interviews from when he was in Egypt, when he was in one of the tombs. He heard, the music of the spheres came to him in the tomb, and that was what changed his musical direction back in the early 80s. That's what drove him into music. And so then
Oh, okay.
I still had a very loose concept of it, and then it came up again in your entering the desert in the Desert Grimoire, and I was like, oh man, this is just like this thing just keep like this is this concept that every time I hear it, it just seems so cool, and it just keeps coming back to the center of the things that I'm looking at, listening to, reading.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love those stories. Thank you for sharing that. And then, we can also think of all the music of the spheres is emanating from Krishna's flute.
Yeah.
And so that the vibration from Krishna's flute creates all sounds, all resonances, the ones we can hear, the ones that animals can hear that we can't,
Yeah, that's
all
an
of those
interesting
things,
concept.
Yeah, so that whole spectrum of sound is mind-boggling,
And
and
it
how
also
mysterious
resonates
that is.
with me because I I can be physically moved by there are songs that I hear that I literally cannot even speak while I'm listening to it. Like it moves me on a
Yeah,
level that I can't even get English out of my mouth. I am
yeah,
shaken to my core by a song that I can't even complete a sentence when it gets to a certain part of a song. Not just any
yeah.
one time. This has happened throughout my whole life, throughout numerous genres, artists. Just I think if you really
Hmm.
get in touch with certain tones and combinations of sounds, it can be so, so moving.
Absolutely. There's a therapeutic modality to it, um, which has significant implications, which of course would be some type of vibrational medicine. But you're absolutely nailing because these sound. This is why each of the chakras, the petals of the chakra, has a sound quality. Each yantra has a sound quality. Um, that's such an important thing to think about because. But that's one of the reasons why I think ambient music is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so a couple more things people said here. The Scrage said, I always loved the open fire since I was a kid. I love barbecues just because of that, so I'm glad you're on the same level as us.
Yeah, that's no, it's true that we have that sense of community. There's a sense of sacredness with that. We can feel that. So what a wonderful comment. That's very true.
Yeah, and then Lucid Dream said, too many people eating for sport and not sustenance, such an important topic. Um,
Yes, that is true. That is very true.
And then Your Flame says, really interesting thought exercise, thinking of every meal as a type of fire offering. I guess similarly, one might even transform exercise into the same sort of thing, burning through energy during a long bike ride, a way to transform otherwise mundane actions into a sacred action. I think that should resonate with you a lot.
100%. Actually, I think. Thank you so much for that comment. That's very insightful and very true. And that is exactly how I see physical activity. That it is a type of fire medicine. That's even this concept of Agni Ayurveda, that some kind of fire is happening. So that is what, because we're heating up the body. We're burning through glucose. We're burning through fat for fuel to feed our muscles. Even our mitochondria are burning up ATP.
Hmm.
That's a symbol of Agni. So all that's going on is all a celebration of Agni. So 100%. Yeah.
Nice. And then
What a
this
comment. I love that comment.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining in on this. And then the Scrage also says, I noticed that many religions have laws and guidelines, such as this idea of not having the next meal until the previous one is digested. Religions have
Yeah.
multiple functions, in my opinion. One of them is to glue social groups together and to support their cohesion. Laws about personal hygiene, mental hygiene, especially. Religion doesn't only give spiritual and ethical support.
What a great comment. That's so true. And that's one of the reasons why I always say that's one of the dangers of secular humanism. That's one of the dangers of this Ahrimanic secularism is that when you just rapidly pull out the rug of religion and there's nothing there
Hmm.
and expect nothing troubling to happen. That's a very foolish concept because people can't see, just like this insightful comment from this listener, that there's a lot more going on than just stupid rules or morality gains from Big Daddy in the sky,
Mm-hmm.
whatever one's argument is with that. So that's so important, so true. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and that's why I was pushing back myself against Jungle Jake's comments earlier, because as I said, I was a pretty devout atheist for a good 15 years of my life, and I knew the whole time that there were so many things that I was missing out on multiple levels. It wasn't like, oh, I just am not worshiping something. Like, I could just look in every direction and say, I'm missing that, I'm missing that, I'm missing this, I'm missing this. Like,
Right.
all of these things around me, just, I knew, like, I can't just live by science. There's more to the world than just being science focused. And it
Right.
took me having one of my physics friends that said, I was talking to him about atheism, and he's like, I'm not atheist. I'm like, what do you mean you're not atheist? And he's like, look, man, you think this, and this. We don't know how those things happened. And I'm like, really? You think that? And he's like, yeah, man,
Right.
there's something else there. And that's when this was like 4 or 5 years ago, and that's when I was like, that just totally threw me for a loop, because I'm like, how are you not atheist? If you're not atheist, you're one of the smartest people I know. I need to rethink this thing. And
Right.
that's what got
Right.
me back on the track of like, okay, I need to look harder again, because maybe I threw, as they say, the baby out with the bathwater.
Right. Right. Right.
um
Yeah. No, that makes total sense, and I think that's an important concept for people to consider, that we have to. And sometimes I understand, because sometimes people have a very uh, their concept of theology is not really developed a lot. So they tend to think of maybe what they learned when they were in 8th grade, or what they were learning in high school, and it defines everything. But then we have to see that now there's much more advanced concepts than what they typically.
yeah, there's so much more that can get built into it than what we learn at those young ages. I
Right.
think
Right.
I think we'll probably be getting close to the end here, and I think the last question that I have here wrote down for you, I
Uh-huh.
think is a good one to sort of bring things to a close on. Is I was watching Sadhguru a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about a story that some lady was listening to a YouTube video of the Gayatri mantra, and
Mm-hmm.
she was chanting along with it every day as she drove her car in traffic, and then she lost the ability to speak, and it took like years of working with Sadhguru before she was able to speak again. Now, I'm not trying to say anything about the validity of that narrative. That's just where
Mm-hmm.
those questions stemming from. What
Right.
warnings would you give people in relation to using mantras and not? I know that to some degree you don't necessarily need to know the meanings behind mantras, but are there certain
Right.
mantras that are not in that case where this, like with the Maha Mantra, it's sort of like anybody, whatever reason, whatever time, just
Right.
do it. But are
Right.
there
Right.
is the
Yeah.
Gayatri Mantra or other ones like that, is that a different case?
Yeah, that's a great question. Uh, I think it brings up a lot of technical details, but essentially, that that brings up one of the most fundamental concepts, is that each different mantras definitely have different qualities, and then within the traditional worldview of Vedic studies, that mantras would not work unless someone had received them through a type of sampradaya, or this some type of disciplic success, and if their guru had not given them the mantra, then it wouldn't work. So there's that unique concept that there's a mantra could be written on paper, you could have it, but it's not going to really vibrate unless it's been activated through the tradition. So there's that aspect of it, which a lot of times that makes people very angry. Um, but that is one important concept. The other thing is that yes, each mantra can be quite different, and mantras aren't necessarily made to be done while we're driving or while we're doing something else. Because mantras literally can change the resonance of our thoughts, of our minds, of our consciousness, and of our awareness. So I never recommend anyone to do mantras while they're driving. But mantras definitely are essentially the sound body of a deity or the sound body of a type of cosmic intelligence, and it will manifest. And so, yes, so depending on what mantra someone's doing, it will have a unique, uh, you know, gunic nature, sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic, could have that, and it will have that function. So that's usually one of the best reasons about like working with it within a tradition, working with a guru, or even looking at one's Jyotish chart or Vedic astrology chart, which shows what kind of resonances they have in their chart, and that would even determine what mantras would be more appropriate to do and at what time. So absolutely, yeah, there's definitely some mantras that not everyone should do, and there's definitely some mantras that are acts that everyone should do. It's much like anything else. There's definitely going to be a spectrum. So what a good question. But hopefully that answers it.
Cool. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Let's see, a couple more things here from chat. Scroggy says, "Oh, right. I guess that secularity indeed can pose a danger. Thinking back, I really had some hard years when I realized I was missing faith, and both moral and epistemological nihilism kicked in for me. When I started seeing the universe immoral and realized I could never 100% be sure I truly know what I think I know, it was not comfortable."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. It reminds me of Hermann Hesse's, uh, you know, Magister Ludi in the Glass Bead game discusses a lot of those concepts
Yeah.
about that. So yeah, so that is an important concept.
Yeah, and then your flame responded to them saying, "I love that last comment. I don't know how one could study astronomy or astrophysics and continue to be atheist." So,
Yeah. One of my teachers from India used to always say, if one studies the unique relationship between the sun and the moon and the size of the two bodies that allows for both eclipses and seasons to happen, how could they possibly be an atheist?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then he would say, not to mention then going out to all the other planets. You know, he was kind of trying to say like just those two alone, we don't understand. Much less talking about Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn. You know, he was just kind of giving an example, and I thought that was very interesting for sure.
yeah. Cool. So, well, I think that should pretty much wrap things up here. I do want to go
Okay.
ahead and throw a couple things into chat here before we finish. Okay,
Sure.
the first link I just put here is to Anathema Publishing store in general.
Okay. Thank
The
you.
next link that I'm dropping in is directly to Craig's Tantric Physics book, which is still available in its hardcover format.
Oh, thank you so much.
The next two links are, we've been speaking so much about Agni today. There's a print there
Oh,
on
nice.
Anathema's site that is a print directly of Agni that is done by
Yes.
Visionis Phosphorescent, which is Victoria Polikarpova, who did all of the
Mm-hmm.
artwork for the Tantric Physics book, and she did a really, really good job. You can follow Visionis Phosphorescent on Instagram, and she's always posting really cool stuff on there. Now,
Beautiful work. Absolutely.
the background that we have here on the video today that I'm using is the Krishna print that is from the Tantric Physics book, and that is
Mm-hmm.
also available as a print, which I bought a copy of that myself, and I really, really love it. It's so beautiful. The prints are just really, really high quality, great prints. And so
Yeah, they
both
came out breathtaking. I was really impressed. Yes.
Yeah, so I recommend just knowing the quality of that one that I have, I would highly recommend any of those prints that you see on Anathema's page. You also, I don't have the link to it because we weren't talking about it in as much detail today, but there was a really nice one there related to Cult of Golgotha as well. Yeah,
Oh, thank you.
if what do you, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the guy that did that one, because I didn't we were more talking about the tantric physics related things today,
Oh, that's
so
fine.
I was staying
Not a
focused on
problem.
that. But I recommend you guys that are watching this now or in the future, click those links, go check that stuff out. His books are really cool. If you are Hindu, you're going to find things to like about it. If you're Buddhist, you're going to find things to like about it. If you're Christian, you're going to find things to like about it. If you're atheist, whatever. I really don't
Yeah,
think it
right,
matters.
right.
There's a lot of really interesting concepts in there, whether you look at it like directly from a religious perspective or from a philosophical perspective or just for the fun of it. There's really cool stuff in these books. So thanks again for coming on here today, Craig, for a second conversation with us. I really can't thank you enough. It's been so much fun.
Oh, it's my honor. And thank you so much for having me on. And thank you so much for all the great questions. I appreciate people taking the time to listen to us today.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, I really appreciate that, guys. Cool. So we'll go ahead and call it a day here. Thanks everybody for stopping by, and I will see you soon. And maybe I'll talk to you again soon, Craig.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon for sure.
All right. Peace, guys.
Take care.